In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how we generated $362,000 in email marketing revenue in just 3 months for this jewelry company from scratch. So one of the first things I want to talk about is just the spread between campaigns and flows. You'll see here that only about 17% of the revenue is coming from campaigns and about 83% of the revenue is coming from flows. Honestly, this is pretty standard and something that we'll see whether you're just starting off and just getting your Klaviyo account set up for the first time, or if you're a little bit more established, but you haven't ever actually ran any campaigns. The reason for this is because the moment you turn flows on, you're going to start generating that revenue, assuming you have traffic. But campaigns take a longer time to build up, right? So what we're building up with the campaigns is two things. One, list size, and two, list engagement. If you have a massive list and the list is just super unengaged, you're not going to generate any revenue. But if you have a massive list and they're super engaged, you're going to generate a ton of revenue. These guys had some people on their list, but not very much. And honestly, the people who were on their list were not super engaged. So it kind of just slowly starts to build up as the months progress. Now, the first thing we start with for every single client is a pop-up. Now, the pop-up you might roll your eyes at, but it is the most important piece of the puzzle. Now, there's ways that you can implement a pop-up that are super annoying, super obtrusive. It pops up right away. You can't get it to leave. It's a spinning wheel of death, like whatever it is. It's super, super annoying. However, there's also ways to implement pop-ups that aren't annoying, that may actually be beneficial for people, and that ultimately don't impact your conversion rate, but also grow your list substantially faster. So that's the first thing we're looking for, because if we can double our pop-up opt-in rate, we're going to be doubling the amount of people in flows and doubling the amount of people who are joining our list for campaigns as well. So it's super, super important. And honestly, one of the most neglected things that I see with both agencies and with brands. Now, usually what we're shooting for here is about a 5% opt-in rate at minimum. Now, some of the brands that we work with are getting like a 15% or a 12% or a 10%. It really depends on the quality of traffic, where that traffic's coming from, how high intent that traffic is. And honestly, it also depends on your offer, right? If you have a really shit offer, if you're like, hey, we're gonna give you 2% off, no one cares, right? But if your offer is like 20% off, great. Now, caveat there, we actually tested this. We had a brand who we onboarded and they were running a crazy pop-up offer of like 35%. And we were like, well, we don't think it's necessary to have that. So we've split tested 35% versus 20%. And not only did we get more opt-ins at 20%, we also had more purchases after the fact. And the conversion rate on those purchases were actually higher as well. So what I'd recommend is like bigger discounts is not always better. So just test, start with like something basic, look at what other people in the industry are doing. If you have no idea what to do, start with 10% off. You'll get at least a baseline to know where to start. So I'm not gonna show you exactly what their pop-up looked like, but what I will show you is what a similar pop-up looks like for similar brands that we work with. Now, this is an example of a pop-up that converts exceptionally well. Basically, it's a teaser, which is this first page here. Then we've got a email opt-in page, and then we've got an SMS opt-in page, and then we've got a thank you. Now, core things to kind of like focus on here and to acknowledge with these is, number one, you're not gathering any sort of information in terms of like people needing to type something out in this first block, right? All it is a teaser. If you want to collect some zero-party data, you absolutely can do that. What I would recommend is make sure that it's not actually like a field you have to type into. Just make it a micro commitment. So make it like a box you need to tick or a button you can press. And then based off of that, then they're redirected to the next page, which is the email capture. Psychologically, this works really well because you're getting a micro commitment from people. People are like, yes, I want this discount or whatever it is. Then they're like, oh man, I have to add my email. A lot of people think it will add friction and it will decrease your opt-in rate. It actually increases your opt-in rate. If you want to run that test, by all means, run that test. We have run it for dozens of clients, and that's the verdict that we've come across. The next one would be a SMS opt-in. If you're running SMS, that would be kind of what it looks like. And then the thank you page. Core thing with the thank you page, just don't have your discount code. The purpose of this pop-up is to gather people's email information that is valid email information. If you give people zero reason to actually go and check their email, then they're not going to check their email. And if it landed in spam, that's not a great way to start a relationship with ESPs, so like email service providers. So keep that in mind as you're building out your pop-up. This is one of the most important things to consider. Now, when it comes to flows, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to break down what we did in month 1, 2, and 3, because we started with them in October, and then we went live at the very end of October. It was like October 30th or something along those lines. So it was really from like November to January 31st is our first 3 months with them. And I'm going to run through what we did in each one of those months. So in the first month, what we did obviously is the pop-up, number 1. The second is looking at core flows. So we start with the welcome series, which is right here. And you'll see this one is generating a ton of revenue for them. The majority of their flow revenue actually, right? So that's going to be number 1, that the pop-up feeds directly into that welcome series. And what we're doing with this brand, we're not actually collecting a lot of zero-party data, but for other brands, for example, if you've got skincare, supplements, anything that is solving a particular pain point, what we recommend doing is collecting that zero-party data and then segmenting out the welcome series based off of what people's responses are. So it could be either pain point driven, it could be desire driven, it could be something else along those lines, but it works incredibly well because it feels so custom, because like it kind of is. So in that welcome series, what we did for this client to generate them in the last 3 months, $196,000, is we built out a 4 email welcome series. So the first one is just a welcome and delivering the offer. The second one is brand story and then just an offer reminder. And then the third one is USPs and education. So the USPs and education piece is basically just talking about like what makes you different. And if you're selling a product that does require maybe a little bit more education, hitting on that, educating people a little bit more in that third email, and then also just reminding people about that offer. Now, depending on how kind of like offer forward you guys are, you might want to have a offer block at the very top in the header, or you might want to have it a little bit further down. Kind of just depends on your brand. Email 4 is going to be social proof and top sellers. So what that means is like showcasing reviews, showcasing PR, so showcasing some of the top sellers, either dynamically or statically. And I'll show you kind of what that looks like as well. Okay, so as an example here, this is what welcome 1 might look like. Be like, welcome to the company. Here's the offer. Here's the code. And then basically going through and kind of like talking a little bit about the company, giving them, again, the reminder of the offer, and then this should be something that you can just copy and paste, and the customer can copy and paste easily. And then again, we just have like our final footer here. So for welcome 2, we're talking brand story, and then again, reminding people about the offer. So here what we're talking about is like, hey, discover like what Pillow Slides is all about. Here's the pairing styles and relief, etc. Here's our journey to like talking about the journey, talking about what makes Pillow Slides different, and then a reminder here about the discount and again, the promo code here that is super easily accessible for people to grab. Okay, so welcome 3, this is an example of another brand, very, very unique kind of styling for this brand. And what we did here is we added in our social proof and verification here, and then we got our footer obviously as well. Now with email 4 of the welcome series, this is like introducing that bestseller. For this brand, we literally just have one main bestseller. So this is talking about like, basically like meet our star player. This is like the #1 bestseller, why people love them. And then again, adding some more reviews here as well. Now, the second flow that we added in for this brand is actually the abandoned checkout flow. And you can see the browse abandonment is doing a little bit better, but the second flow that we usually start with, because it's usually like the #1 or the #2 revenue producing flow for most clients, is the abandoned checkout flow. And what we want to do there is just consider where people are at in their customer journey. So many brands I see will set up a generic abandoned checkout flow or generic abandoned cart flow, and it's basically just like, hey, like you forgot something, hey, your cart misses you, hey, your cart's lonely, hey, do you want 10% off, 50% off, 100% off? Or like the worst that I see is like, hey, your cart's lonely, here's 50% off or 15% off or 10% off in the first email. The reason that sucks is because you're giving away margin without handling other people or other objections that people might have based off of where they're at. Because the thing is, with the abandoned checkout, they made it to the checkout page, meaning they've made it to the page where they literally add in their credit card information and their shipping address. they know what they want. They like with 100% certainty, it's like, we know what they want, but something's holding them back. It's oftentimes going to be something like trust. It's going to be like they don't trust you. They don't know enough about you. Sometimes it's just a simple reminder they got distracted by their like cat, dog, husband, wife, kid, whatever it is. Oftentimes it might be shipping. It might be shipping cost. It might be shipping time. It could be cost. It could be price as well, right? But what we want to do is handle all of the non-monetary objections first, because then you don't have to give away margin. If you handle the objection that is price, you have to give away margin right away, but all of the other ones will work quite well and you don't have to give away margin at the beginning. So usually what we'll start with is one, a simple reminder. Two is going to like email two is going to be a social proof and kind of like reassurance style email. Email 3 is going to be handling other objections there. Email 4 is going to be that incentive. So when I say other objections, I mean like things that might be specific to your brand. Like it could be things like shipping cost. It could be things like, hey, if I order this, if you're like, let's say you're selling like frozen meat or something like that. It's like, hey, is this going to arrive and is it actually going to be okay? Or is it going to be spoiled by the time it gets here? That type of thing, right? So just things to consider on that front. And the next thing we did with this brand is actually looked at campaigns. Now we only sent 2 campaigns for them, and I'll show you kind of what that looked like here. And we actually started, our first campaigns were not sent until, well, actually this is the last 90 days. If I look at last year, our first campaign actually was sent on November 26th, which is Black Friday. And what you'll notice, like what we wanted to do is like slowly ramp this up. Okay, so after we set up those 2 flows, the next thing we wanted to do was focus on campaigns. But the thing that a lot of brands will get wrong is they'll just start to send 100,000 campaigns or 10 campaigns or 20 campaigns in a month. But what you actually want to do is warm things up. Now, like I said previously, like with this brand, they didn't really have a ton of engaged people previously. So it took some time to build things up. And you'll notice here, like when we first started sending, we sent on like the 15th, the 17th, the 24th, the 25th, and these are all going to different segments, but you'll see that there's quite a bit of space in between these, right? So we've got like 1 and 2, right? Different segments. 1 and 2 different segments. Essentially, we've got like 1 and 2 different segments, 1 and 2 different segments, and then we've got another one here, which is also different segments. So what we want to do when we're starting with campaigns is just start off slow and make sure that there's a reasonable gap between sends, essentially. So we don't want to start off by sending like 10 campaigns all within a week. What you'll notice is like we had these, and then we were like, okay, things are looking pretty good. The first couple of sends were like not great in terms of open rate, but then the next 3 were solid, and then these ones are like kind of, okay, and then this one's not all that great. And well, this one was a resend, which is why the open rate is significantly lower. But you'll notice like the revenue that is generated from these is not a whole ton, but then it's slowly ramping up, right? And obviously like BFCM is going to be bigger, but we'll do this no matter when we launch for a client. And the reason for that is because we want to make sure 2 things. 1, we're not pissing off the subscribers who have never heard from us, right? But 2, we're also making sure that we're set up properly, and ESPs, so like email service providers like Yahoo, Gmail, all of those email service providers aren't looking at this account and being like, ooh, why are these guys randomly sending 20,000 emails in, like when they haven't ever sent anything before? Like, what's going on here? Are they spamming people? And usually what that means for ESPs is like either they're spamming people or they bought a list, right? Which is kind of like spamming people anyways, right? So keep that in mind as you're ramping this up and as you start to scale. Now, right now we're sending more like 15 campaigns per month, maybe a little bit more than that for this brand, because things are going really well, engagement's looking really strong, and things are just overall going really well for the brand. So let me navigate back here to flows. The next flow in month 2 that we actually focused on, and now I'll kind of get into month 2 and the strategy that we use there. The next flow that we focus on for pretty much all of our clients is going to be browse abandonment. And this is basically just a flow for people who have hit a certain product page, but have not added to cart, have not initiated checkout, and have not purchased. Our browse abandonment flow is relatively simple here. The first thing we start with is just a simple reminder. The second thing is product benefits and related items. And then the third thing is going to be kind of like an offer or an incentive specifically for people who have not purchased before. The next flow in this is going to be your abandoned cart, which is the next one kind of like in this list here. And this one is basically to capture people outside of this one, right? So how these flows work is like if someone's in the welcome series, they just joined the list, right? But we want to make sure that if someone has initiated checkout, that's a higher intent flow, and we're dealing with different objections based off of that level of intent. So we don't want them to be receiving the welcome series and the abandoned checkout at the same time, or all 4 of these at the same time, right? So what we need to do is make sure we have exclusions. And then the purpose is that if someone, like, let's say, browses a product but doesn't add to cart, they're getting this one. But if they add to cart, then they're getting this one. But if they go a little bit further and initiate checkout, then they're getting this one, right? So what we're trying to do here is make sure that we're hitting people based off of where they're at in their customer journey. And with the abandoned cart emails, it's a similar approach here. Again, a simple reminder, and then depending on what kind of product category we're working with, we might also include some social proof and reassurance. And then again, depending on the objections that we typically will have for that brand, we'll craft up the next couple of emails. In terms of campaigns, this is where we start scaling up more, right? So you'll notice like those first couple of campaigns were not all that great, and then we start scaling up a little bit more. Now, we scaled up more aggressively than we normally would have because we were in November and Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So basically what we're doing here is scaling up and sending more emails. Now, most of the time when we're working with a brand, it's going to be like anywhere from like 2 to 4 in the first month, 4 to 6, or maybe 8 in the second month. And then the third month is going to be where we start pushing a little bit further. And I'll share that in a moment. But in this example, we were just taking them on before Black Friday. So it's kind of like we just got to push and get as many people as possible to purchase. And honestly, engagement rates were really strong for the most part. So we just kept pushing. Now, month 3, which was January of 2026, it's just last month at the time of recording this, we focused on, I don't want to say ancillary flows, but other flows that aren't core revenue driving necessarily, but are still really important. So the thank you flow is the first one, which is, and a lot of brands get the thank you flow wrong. Really what we want to do with the thank you flow is, well, the first one is thank you, which is pretty self-explanatory. Thank you and like order confirmation. The second one is purchase validation. So what that means is effectively making people feel like they made the right choice, right? Like if someone just spent $1,000 on a product, or if someone spent $200 on a product, or $100 on a product even, it's like they want to know that they made the right decision. So we want to validate that. We want to validate that and get people excited and get people hyped up. And we do that through social proof. We do that through, just like getting people excited and letting them know how, like what they have joined, right? If they've joined a community or a community of like-minded people or something like that, like we want to make sure people get excited and hyped up and they're actually looking forward to receiving their order. Now, the other emails we might do in month 3 are going to be like the sunset flow, right? So the sunset flow, usually actually this doesn't produce like any revenue. So the fact that it's got like $1,000 is great. Usually the sunset flow doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. And that's largely just because it's like a breakup flow. It's like a, hey, are you still interested? Do you still have a pulse type of flow? And then we might do a site abandonment. Site abandonment is, again, a little bit lower. It's very, very low intent. It's someone who hasn't even hit a product page, but maybe they've hit like a collection page, for example. So we're trying to like capture those people. Sometimes that can do well depending on how the website is set up. But other ones we might focus on depending on the niche could be like a replenishment flow for skincare, apparel, supplements, that type of thing. We might do a loyalty flow. We might do a win back flow. We might build upon the existing flow. So like, don't stop at 4. Like if this email or if this flow is pumping and email 4 is doing really well, let's continue to build on that, right? Like we don't need to stop at email 4. We want to make sure it's spaced out and we're not just sending the same shit 6 different times. However, if we can send more emails and make more money, that's kind of the purpose of this system. Now, the other thing that we're doing in month 3 is really starting to ramp up content. Now, what you'll notice with the content that we're sending, I'm just gonna go back to the last 30 days. What you'll notice about the content that we send is it's not just all sales stuff, right? We will have sales if the brand allows for it. We'll have some sales, we'll have some promotions, we'll have some like more promo heavy stuff. However, a lot of the stuff that we're doing is actually going to be more like brand education, collection spotlight, community highlights. You can see here, we got product spotlight, collection spotlight again. This is particularly useful when you're talking with like fashion brands, apparel brands, jewelry brands, even like when you're talking about skincare or supplements or things like that, like having a collection spotlight for a specific pain point or things like that, or having a product spotlight on a like winning product, whatever that might be. There's so much opportunity here to really have a variety of different content here. And some of them are going to be very high relevance and some of them are going to be pushing like different types of content. So our purpose isn't necessarily to generate a ton of revenue. Like for example, like this one, right? This is brand education. Like we're not trying to generate revenue really off of this, right? we're not trying to generate revenue off of some of these. Sometimes things will work really well. Sometimes they will not work all that well. But the idea is that month over month with campaigns, we're growing that revenue, right? Not only per send, which might take a little bit longer sometimes, but also the revenue that is coming overall from campaigns versus from flows versus from like other platforms as well. So anyways, I hope this is helpful. This is our like literally the strategy that we used to generate this brand $362,000 in the first 3 months of working with us. If you do have an e-commerce brand and you're generating over $100,000 a month and you don't want to do email yourself and you're watching this video and you're like, I really don't want to do this, go ahead, click the link below. There is a link to book in a call. We only take on 4 clients a month. So if my calendar does not show any availability, try back in a week or 2 and hopefully we can book in a time to chat. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your day and I hope you found this video valuable. Thanks so much.